Shabbat Shalom. How many of you feel like you've already been ministered today and Yahweh's moving in your life? Amen. As was alluded to earlier, this week's Torah portion is Pinchas. And I've taught on Pinchas numerous times. And initially going in, it's a word that you feel like it's going to be fire and brimstone. It's the zealous one. And as I began to look and attempt to go that direction, the Father just kept bringing me right back. I want you to focus on something else. How many realize whenever you start pursuing Him, seeking Him out, He has a tendency to begin to just get all in your business. He has a tendency to begin to show those areas, the things that have to be cut off, circumcised in order to know Him more. And as I began to look at Pinchas in this Torah portion, the focus and the word that He began to drop into my spirit and focus on was, this is about a covenant that was cut, a promise that was over 400 years in the making. Israel was at the threshold, the cusp of their inheritance. And as I began to dwell on that and to focus on that, He brought me back to Abraham when that covenant was first cut. And we can see, that's when it was first cut, but to be honest, it goes all the way back to creation. This is about a covenant that was cut at creation. And here we are, we find ourselves, the generation at the end, about to see the culmination of that covenant, about to see the promise, the restoration, everything that going all the way back to the beginning. We've been waiting on this moment. Just like Israel, we stand at the threshold of the promise. And as I began to think about that, I was reminded Abraham nor Israel were the ones that walked between the pieces. They're not responsible for ensuring that that promise is met. And how many of you realize if you're an A-type personality, one that likes, I'm the leader, I'm in control, it's going to happen when it's, and we got a skill, we're sticking to it. And yet, the entire wilderness journey that Israel was going through was about them learning. You're not responsible, nor do you dictate the time when you will access your promise. The one that walked between the pieces will. But you know what you're responsible for? You're responsible for bringing the sacrifice. He walks between the sacrifices. He walks between the pieces. You want Him to show up? Bring a sacrifice. You want Him to show up? Bring this and lay it on the altar. That's the way you'll see the one walk between the pieces. That's when you'll see the one, the great I Am, appear on the scene, who is the promise and the guarantor, the surety for that promise. And that's what this Torah portion is about. And as I began to look, it is titled Piinchas, Phinehas. And it's taken from Numbers chapter 25, verse 10 to chapter 30, verse 1. And if you begin to read in context what's taking place, Israel's really been just kind of on a downhill trek. It kind of starts back when the spies go into the land, and it's one thing after another, and it leads all the way up into this moment. They're at the cusp of their inheritance. They're at the threshold. They can look. They're at the Jordan River. They're there in the plains of Moab. They can see what Yahweh promised them right there. And we find that at this very location, rebellion breaks out in the camp. And we find that Israel compromises with Baal Peor, the Midianites, and the Moabites. This Torah portion is named after Pinchas, who alone chooses to deal swiftly and decisively with the rebellion. And you have to understand what this rebellion was about. It was intended to desecrate and sever Israel's access to Yahweh, because it dealt with desecrating the tent of appointed times, the place that they would meet with Him, their access, the one that guaranteed their promise. If you're cut off from the one that guarantees your promise, the enemy understands, then you have no promise, because it's not in your own strength, it's in the one that made the promise. And so as I began to look at this, I thought, my goodness, it's amazing to me because Yahweh's beginning to reveal in the season we're in the significance of these appointed times, how to calculate when those appointed times are, but simultaneously to the when, he's focusing on the how we appear. When I come into these moed, how am I entering the tent? It's easy to point fingers at Zimri and Cosby, and you went in and you intended to desecrate. And yet, how am I entering? How do I enter? Am I cutting myself off from access to the one that guaranteed my promise? Or am I entering in the right manner, understanding that to enter in here is to enter into his holiness? And when you look at this, Pinchas, because of his actions in protecting and ensuring that the holiness of Yahweh is kept, he is granted what they term in English a covenant of peace. And he's promised an everlasting priesthood. And we're going to look at all this. As I began to delve into this, Yahweh directed my attention. Look at the timing and the setting, because it's important to know. We've already addressed it. Israel's encamped at the boundary line of their promise and their inheritance. It's the 42nd and final stop of their Exodus journey. Here, the last vestiges of Egypt must be removed. How many was it? If it made it 40 years, that was pretty deep in there. That was that closely held little piece of Egypt. You can have all this. I'll give it all. But I'm all the way here at the last stop, and there's still some in there. Held on to it that long. It must be removed prior to them stepping into the land of promise, because the inheritance is for the mature sons and daughters. So let's look at this location. In Numbers chapter 22, verse 1, which was in last week's Torah portion that Shepherd John did an excellent job laying this foundation, this is where they're camped at. All of this unfolds here. And it's given this description. In Numbers 22, verse 1, it says, "And the children of Israel set forward and pitched in the plains of Moab on this side of Jordan by Jericho." When you look at it in the Hebrew language, the word plains, it's Strong's number 6160, Arabah. It's translated as a desert plain, a steppe, a wilderness. And immediately, originally, you're like, well, what's so different? They've been in the wilderness for 40 years. This meaning, though, however, goes on to describe it as an arid, sterile region. If something is sterile, it means it doesn't really produce fruit. It's not a fruitful place. So they've entered a point on their journey where it looks as if things aren't able to produce fruit. It's sterile, a place of things being cut off. And it's quite interesting because this, here in Numbers 22, verse 1, it's the first time you see this word. Israel has never been in this place before. This is the first time we see this term, Arabah. And it seems to stand in stark contrast to the previous term for wilderness, where they've been for this entire journey, which was termed the Midbar. When you break down the term Midbar, it's the place where the mouth speaks the word. How many of you feel like you've been in your own personal wilderness season? I dare say most people would probably raise their hand, because collectively as a body, we've been in a wilderness season. And in this wilderness season, it's easy at times to begin to grumble, to complain, to wonder, when is this wilderness season going to end? And yet he reminds you, this is where the promised word is being spoken. You're in the wilderness because he has a promise to speak to you. The season in the wilderness is where you're able to hear his voice, and they exit this place where they have been constantly hearing and having the word placed in, and now they come to the place called Arabah, the sterile region, where the word that should produce fruit in their lives can it, where it looks as if it might be cut off. Now, as we continue to look at this, it was interesting to me that this term Arabah, it comes from the root arav, which is where we also get the term arev, evening. And the root meaning of arav, it means to pledge, to exchange, to become a surety for, to take on a pledge. And it has the connotation of a garment. In the scriptures, you'll see that a garment, a cloak, was given as a pledge, as a surety. And you'll also find that the exchanging of garments symbolizes that there's a change in status. So they exit the wilderness, they exit the place where the promised word is spoken, and they now enter the Arabah. In other words, it seems to be indicating that Israel should be anticipating at this moment a tangible sign, a guarantee regarding the covenant promises that have been spoken to them while they were in the Midbar, the wilderness. It's indicating that there's an opportunity. This is a set time, a divine moment where there's an exchanging of status and position that's about to take place. In fact, Arabah is a cognate of the Hebrew word aruba, which means a pledge, a guarantee, a token. It implies a tangible sign of a current or soon expected reality. And so with this understanding that as Israel enters this place, they should have understood there's about to be an exchanging of garments. And in the Hebrew, my garment will identify my status. My garment will identify whose house I belong to. Why do you think Revelation talks about the garments of the harlot and the garments of the bride? And so as he begins to reveal to them there's about to be an exchanging of garments, it should also indicate that there is a choice of what garment Israel will put on. And it seems that whatever garment they choose to put on or not put on, that it may have the potential to affect whoever gets to cross that threshold and enter that house. Now, as we continue to look at these same letters, the root of Arav, it's quite interesting because these same letters rearranged from the Hebrew term abar. It means to cross over, to pass through. What they are anticipating having to do, they are going to avar. They're going to cross over the Jordan, cross the threshold to enter the land of their promise. Abar is the root of the term Ivri, the Hebrew. It's seen in Genesis chapter 15, verse 17. When the burning lamp and the smoking furnace passes between the pieces, he avar, regarding a covenant promise that Abraham is witness to, in which his seed will inherit the land, that his current descendants in this Torah portion are at the threshold of that promise. And we find that as they come here and they enter this place, it's a strategic reminder that cannot be ignored. They're reminded of the promise that was made to Abraham. When the covenant of the pieces was cut and Yahweh entered and he walks between these pieces, and it was regarding the one that would have the right of inheritance. In fact, this was Yahweh's answer to Abraham's question, how do I know I will inherit? Yahweh means you bring a sacrifice. And he walks between the pieces. And so it's in this very place from the natural that looks like it's a sterile region with no ability to produce fruit, that Israel, in this moment, they're being reminded and given a surety, a pledge, a guarantee, a tangible sign of a soon expected reality, just as Abraham was regarding the covenant promise. And so we find that in this place, Israel too should be expecting the arrival of someone that's about to walk between the pieces, who's the guarantor of their covenant promise. And when this individual shows up and begins to walk between the pieces, and they have the token, they have the garment, that's what's going to enable them to cross and enter in. It reminds me too of in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve should have been expecting the one that was the guarantor of the covenant to show up. But if you're not careful, the enemy has a tendency to slip in right before. Be careful what garment you put on. Now, looking further into this term abar, the root of Hebrew, the Ivri, the one who crossed over, isn't it interesting? Abraham is known as the Hebrew, the Ivri. Why? Because he understood he had a covenant where one Ivri, where one walked between the pieces so that he could have a promise. Now, abar is specifically used to describe how one crosses over a river or stream, and it can indicate a passage or place of crossing over, describing a method to cross through something safely that could be detrimental otherwise. And I want you to think about this, because as a believer, we know that we've been given promises. And yet to cross over to access those promises, the word already is beginning to warn you, it can be detrimental if you choose to cross in the wrong manner. And yet, there's a provided safe method of passage. Could it be that the only ones who will safely cross are those in possession of the pledge, the token, who have exchanged their garments, and they have put on this garment that will identify them as one that has a right to cross the threshold? We find that a bar is first seen in Genesis chapter 8, verse 1, regarding the Ruach of Elohim passing over a bar, Noah in the ark. And it seems to emphasize here in this term, a bar, this place of safe crossing, it emphasizes the need for an ark, the need for some sort of vessel, some sort of refuge or safe place that will preserve the integrity and the authenticity of the word or seed that's held within that ark, so that when they reach the threshold, this doorway, they have proof that they are in fact heirs of that inheritance and promise. And it seems to be emphasized, especially here in this place, the Arabah, the plains of Moab, where the very name of this location declares it's a place of mixing, it's a place of mingling, it's a place of compromise. But with what? From the surface, it seems obvious. Well, we read the Torah portion. They mix and mingle with Baal Peor, with the daughters of Moab and Midian, but this is just a physical manifestation. How many realize that things take place in the spiritual and then they bear their fruit in the natural? And when you begin to look at this location and what takes place, you'll find that this is about generational sins and behaviors that they're being faced with. The same sins that Israel compromised with while in Egypt have now come full circle. And right before they cross, they're facing the same generational junk that should have been cut off in the wilderness. Exactly. It's interesting to note that when you look at the name Baal Peor, Peor has the same root stem as Pharaoh. You left Pharaoh 40 years ago. And yet here they're faced with that same thing. What garment will they put on? When they're faced with things that have been done for generations passed down, things that are second nature to them because it's just part of their characteristics and their makeup if we haven't dealt with it, when faced with it, do we put that back on? And then when it comes time to cross the threshold, that garment says, wait a minute, that's not identifying you as the son or daughter capable of handling the inheritance and the promise. That garment has to be removed. It's interesting to note that it's not just Moab, but Midian as well. And when you look at the name Midian, the root stem of Midian, the mem dalet, also means a garment, to measure for a garment. Midian came and is joined to Moab. Moab, his name means of his father. When you look at these two culprits, it points towards a garment of the father. In other words, this garment will identify who they are the heir of. So at the same time, Israel's at this location waiting for the one that's going to walk between the pieces and give them a garment, a token, proof, evidence that they have right to that promise. Someone else shows up also with a garment. Whose house do the garments I wear identify me belonging to? And when we begin to look at this, this was the purpose of the wilderness. This is why we have to spend the season in the wilderness. When we come out of Egypt, when we come out of Babylon, we have certain garments that identify us as slaves, as individuals in bondage that are dictated to by our flesh and our emotions and the things that makes this feel good. And yet in the wilderness, we're taught that this has to be circumcised. There must be an exchanging of garments because I can't take this fleshly carnal nature, come into his house, into the place of his holiness, and expect to handle his inheritance. It's not ours, it's his. It all belongs to him. I can't expect to handle it with that same fleshly carnal attitude and nature. And so we find that as they're here at the threshold, it's easy to look at Moab's got some issues. Moab, Midian, they've really got some problems. And yet Yahweh begins to immediately focus, no, Israel, where are you? What's going on in here? What garment are you wearing? What garment am I wearing? When you look at Moab, the full context of the Hebrew word picture is that it's the source of the strength of the house and who directs the course of the house. It is here directly before crossing that Israel will be tested, and it's going to be revealed who is the true source of their strength and direction. When it looks like from the natural that everything has been cut off, you're surrounded by devastation, it looks as if you have no hope. Who's the true father of the seed of the word within you? What will affect your direction? What will affect your course? Where will you draw your strength from? We find that Moab as well is directly connected with generational curses that are fathered and passed down. So as Israel stands at the threshold of their inheritance and promise, the utmost importance is being placed on ensuring that the word, the promise that they've been given, it's unmixed, it's unmingled with the carnal, fleshly nature of man. It seems that Israel is being asked and tested at this location, at the threshold of their promise. Will they handle the promise and inheritance as a mature son and daughter? Or will they allow it to be compromised and mixed with the fleshly characteristics that have been cultivated for generations? Am I frustrated? Am I impatient? Am I moved by my emotions and flesh? Am I dictated to by my circumstances? How many know that it's easy to say that we're not and walk super spiritual when everything's going my way? I'm not impatient when I'm getting what I want. I'm not impatient and frustrated when everything's great. But the moment that you begin to be squeezed, the moment the pressure is on, how do I respond? Am I frustrated? Now I'm mad. Now I'm frustrated. You see, Yahweh likes to get in your business. And he begins to poke his finger on certain areas. How are you going to handle this? If I can't handle this area in my life in the walking after the Spirit, how in the world can I expect him to entrust me with everything that he has as the inheritance for his people? Because I can't handle that. Frustrated. I can't handle that based on my emotions. I can't handle that based on what my flesh says. You know what? Let's do it this way. And so we find that this is what Israel's faced with. They've been in the wilderness 40 years. It's been a constant season where they're being trained, where they've been hearing the word. Why? Because the word will cause all of those areas to be cut off. It will renew your mind. It will train you up. Why? So all for the reason that when they're at the threshold, at this moment, they would be able to say, Hineni, send me. Now, it's no accident that 42, this is the 42nd stop, is the numerical value of the Hebrew term yaval. Strong's number 2986. It means to bring, to carry, to lead, or to flow. It's the root stem of yovel, freedom, jubilee. It carries the sense of something that's about to be produced or born. The basic meaning indicates to transfer something from one place to another, and so it seems perhaps that it's indicating a gateway or a doorway through which something that has been concealed is now seen or manifested. This is what happens at the Yovel. What looked like a slave is now revealed, no, that's a son. What looked like an individual that had no inheritance and is cut off, at the Yovel, there's a complete switch in exchange. No, this is their promise, Yovel. And yet, on the other hand, remember, it's indicating that whatever's been hidden, whatever's been closed off, that this is about to be revealed. So it seems to indicate that whatever has been cultivated and nurtured while in the wilderness within the hearts of the people, it's about to be born. Remember, the wilderness is where the word is spoken. But when Israel spends all their time complaining and moaning and grumbling about our time in the wilderness, how well are we hearing? And so we find that whatever word that they've been cultivating, whatever they've been feeding, that 40 years in the wilderness, it's now the designated season, the gestational cycle has come full circuit, and now it's about to be born. What happens in the plain of Moab is about revealing whether Israel will be born again as living sons and daughters ready to handle as stewards their inheritance, or whether it will be the continuation of the vicious generational cycles that when interwoven and mixed with your promise, it has the potential to choke it off. So now we find, my goodness, it's not about Moab. It's about Israel. It's about you and I. In fact, Pinchas has a numerical value of 208. It's the same value as Isaac, Yitzhak, the son of promise, who has covenant standing. In Genesis 17, verse 21, it says, "But my covenant will I establish, it will have standing with Isaac." He has covenant standing. But 208 is also the same value as Hagar, the bondwoman, who, go figure, was Egyptian. This Yovel, this Jubilee, something's born, but the question waiting to be answered, is it the sons of promise or is it the sons of bondage, the flesh, still cultivating the same generational bondage of Egypt? 40 years they've been in the womb of the Word. For 40 years they were in this season where they had the opportunity to have His Word planted inside of them so that come this moment in time, they would be presented and be able to stand as sons and daughters of promise. We too have a promised Jubilee on the horizon, and we find ourselves standing at the threshold. How many realize that it's here, that it's the most crucial moment of the entire journey? Because now it's the moment of truth. Are we sons and daughters of promise, an ark that has preserved and carried His word, circumcising anything that would compromise it, or will we be revealed as sons of bondage that have allowed the generational baggage to mix and mingle with our promise? We find it's here that Israel's garments are beginning to reveal their status. And it's quite interesting to me because Yovel, that root Yovel, 42, it also, the same letters, numerical value rearranged form the term Bali, Strong's number 1097, and it means without, a wearing out, failure, or destruction. How many realize that if you don't put on, if you're not garmented in your promise, then there's the potential for a wearing out. There's the potential for destruction and failure because it's not in your strength that you're able to make it. It's the one that guaranteed that promise that ensures this word is kept. So if I put myself in that ark and I put that on, then it seems to ensure there's a Yovel on the horizon. But if I fail to do that, then the potential for me to get worn out, to get tired, to get frustrated, to allow all of these fleshly, carnal characteristics to begin to take over, that potential's there. We find that this pivotal moment in time is the proverbial line drawn in the sand that determines what door is about to open. A doorway that leads to destruction or one that leads to your Yovel and restoration. Same location, same time frame, two different outcomes. It's no accident that these 42 stops correlate to the 42 months of the great tribulation of Jacob's trouble, which is also likened to something being born, the labor pains. Yet the same principle applies. For some it will be a time of destruction, and yet for others it's the timing of your Yovel. As you have a covenant of peace with the great King, the one who is the guarantor of the promise. It can be complete devastation all around you. It doesn't matter. Why? Because the one that walked between the pieces is about to show up and guarantee, no, this one belongs in my house. Amen? Now, it's significant to note that the Hebrew term bali, a wearing out, failure, without, it carries a negative implication as it negates something by interjecting the idea of without. That due to whatever is lacking in connection with this term bali, whatever you're lacking, it has the potential to lead to destruction and failure. Now remember, a bar, a place of safe crossing. As we await our future Yovel, our future Jubilee, there's the potential for failure and destruction, and yet He's reminding you there's an ark, there's a sanctuary, there's a refuge that you can avail yourself of, and in the midst of this devastation going on all around you, you can be assured of safe crossing. Amen? Now this term bali, this term meaning without, lacking, it's seen in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. It says, my people, remember, look, he's not talking to Moab. He's He's not talking to Egypt. He's not talking to Babylon. He's not talking to the world. He's talking to my people. My people are destroyed for lack, beli, of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, and thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law, the Torah of thy Elohim, I will also forget thy children. We find that because his people have failed to understand and have rejected this specific knowledge that Hosea is referring to, he connects the fact that they're incapable of functioning as priests. And you have to understand the significance of this statement because the role of heir, priest, firstborn, kings were all originally connected and intertwined until Israel mishandled it. And then we find that it begins to be distinct and separated until Messiah, once again, it all comes and he joins it all back together. Which is exactly why Israel ended up in Egypt in the first place. They mishandled the inheritance. They mishandled the role of the heir, priests, and kings in the house. And so they're sent into Egypt. And so it seems that their return infers that now, as they're returning, they must now present themselves and prove that they are capable of handling it the right way. How many realize that we've been scattered as a body into the nations, into the four corners of the earth? Why? Because our ancestors mishandled the inheritance. They're removed from it, and now as we prepare for our return, just like Israel standing at the threshold of the Jordan River, he's looking and waiting to see if we will handle it correctly. Looking to see who is a capable son and daughter that's standing at the threshold and will be able to now handle this as a good steward. Now let's look at this term knowledge. Hosea says that we're destroyed for lack of knowledge. The word knowledge is Strong's number 1847, da'at, translated as knowledge from the root yada. To know by experience. It means to know intimately, deeply, and with compassion. If I know something by experience, it means that I've had an opportunity to handle it. I've had an opportunity to actually have my hands on this. And so when we're looking and expecting to be entrusted with this inheritance, how many realize that whatever he's entrusted you with right now, this is your chance to yada, to know, to understand, to have experience, to also prove myself that the way I'm handling this is showing that I am a mature son and daughter, so that by the time I enter, I will yada, I will know. Amen? When you break down the term da'at, it's written dalet ayin tav. The letter dalet is a doorway. Ayin tav is the Hebrew root word that translates as time, a fit or proper time. What was Trent talking about? Learn to manage your time. Count your days. Manage your time. My goodness, that's what the scriptures tell us to do as well. That's part of your inheritance. Time. You've been given time. What are you doing with your time? It indicates a fit or proper time. Most often, it's used to express the time of the occurrence of some event. And so it seems to indicate that the lack of intimate knowledge regarding the doorways of the fit times and the timing of Yahweh has the potential to cause the people of Yahweh to be destroyed. Hosea seems to warn that if we don't understand, if we don't have knowledge regarding the proper timing of Yahweh, then there is the potential for us to become worn out and eventually destroyed. Could it be that his time, his set times, his set events, his moedim, in fact, are doorways to the ark of safe passage, and that they teach us how to walk as heirs, kings, and priests? And so now I can also take into place not only what I have, not only what he's entrusted me with right now, am I supposed to be handling as a steward, yada, learning, having experience, but now he takes and he attaches also the moedim. Shabbat being the most repeated. How do I handle Shabbat? How do I handle Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, going down the list? How do I handle these? These divine set appointments, these are doorways to a place of safe passage. These are doorways that teach you how to walk as kings, priests, and heirs in his house. Did you know that Daniel warns of the same thing regarding the timing? Regarding this future time of trouble, Daniel chapter 7 verse 25 says, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and he shall wear out Bala," the same root stem as Bali, without a lack of, "the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time." Notice that Daniel strategically connects the anti-Messiah's intent to wear out the saints, is what it says in English. In Hebrew, it's the word kadosh, the holy set apart ones, which once again, in Exodus chapter 19, we find that to be a holy nation, a kadosh nation, was directly connected with Israel's role as a kingdom of priests, heirs in his house. He will seek to wear these individuals out by changing set appointed times and laws, the word da'at. Translated as decree, it's a cognate of da'at, knowledge, that Hosea speaks of, the beli, the lack of knowledge, causing the people to be destroyed. Now notice that both Hosea and Daniel's warnings deal with the topic of the priesthood and their number one responsibility to guarding and understanding the appointed set times, the Oel Moed, the tent of the appointed times. Could our understanding of these doorways affect what is manifested and born at the Yovel season? That if I'm obedient to make sure that nothing comes in to compromise the seed and the word that I've been given at these set appointed times, then come the Yovel, I shouldn't have to worry about what's about to come out, what's about to be born, what's about to be revealed. Why? Because I've guarded the word and the seed. Shabbat being the most repeated, an opportunity for that seed to be compromised, an opportunity for me to mishandle his presence. We find that this is why Israel is redeemed and delivered at Passover. It's the starting of their journey to be transformed into heirs capable of accessing the promised inheritance, a journey that will take them through the feast circuit of transformation. How many realize the Moedim function not only as a witness that testifies of his faithfulness and his character, but they literally become a path, a circuit that you and I walk, that as we walk this circuit, as we show up every Shabbat, as we keep these feasts, you're being transformed. At Passover, we learn of circumcision. The fleshly carnal man can't enter here. And simultaneously, we experience and learn that he redeems. At unleavened bread, I know he heals, and I learn to humble myself simultaneously. I decrease so he can increase. At Yom HaBikurim, I experience his power of resurrection. At Shavuot, he changes our standing and he empowers his people. He calls them a kadosh nation, a holy set-apart people, intended to be a nation and a kingdom of priests. I know he wars on my behalf. Why? Yom Teruah. I know he covers me, Yom Kippur, and I know he is with me always, Sukkot. Walking out these cycles breaks generational curses. Why? Because you're no longer the individual that started the journey. You learn to handle what is kadosh, what is holy, and set apart. And we learn that as we enter these divine appointments, Shabbat being the most repeated, I learned that I can't enter without dealing with this right here. These are the parts, the pieces that he comes to walk between. And so every time I enter into one of these moedims, these doorways to this ark where I'm going to meet with the one that walks between the pieces, every single time it's a reminder, this has to die. This has to decrease. This has to be transformed. Do you think this is why the anti-Messiah seeks to change and circumvent this understanding? He seeks to change the times and the seasons. Why? If you don't have access to those doorways, there's no hope of transformation or resurrection. There's no body capable of wearing the mantle of kings and priests. There's no fit heirs to the promise. Why? Because those doorways are what transform you from one that's a slave in Egypt to one that's a mature son and daughter at the end of the journey. Amen? In other words, come the season of the Yovel, the time where something is about to be revealed and born, those who have intimate knowledge regarding his set times, who have truly understood the purpose of joining him on this circuit, will be presented not as sons of Hagar, not as sons of Egypt. That's who they were when they started. When they first left Egypt, they had the characteristics, the garments, the identity of sons of Hagar. But as they exit at Passover and they begin to walk this feast cycle, they begin to walk the circuit, their entire existence revolving around the Oel Moed, the tent of appointed times, learning to walk and handle what is kadosh, learning to become kadosh. By the end, they're sons of promise. Continuing to look at this, da'at has a numerical value of 474. It's the same value as chasut. It's translated as meaning refuge. It's from the root meaning to seek refuge or to put your trust in, confide, or hope in Yahweh. It also reveals that while waiting on the Yovel, while waiting on the manifestation of the promise, when the potential is there to be worn out, to become weary, and in that weakened state to revert to handling things in our flesh, that in those moments, those same set times become our chasut, our refuge. Why? Because the moment I'm just sick and tired, the moment I'm frustrated, the moment I'm getting aggravated, my goodness, it's Shabbat tomorrow. Wait a minute, I have to deal with this. Wait a minute, this has to be cut off. This has to be removed. I have to prepare to enter Shabbat. And as I enter, I'm reignited, I'm refocused. He's holy, so I am to be holy. Do you see how these cycles become that refuge and remind you consistently? Why do you think Shabbat has to be every single week? He knows us. But that's why that's his mercy. Every single week, I have that potential to come, to meet with the one that walked between the pieces, the one that made the promise, the one that reaffirms the promise, and now I can go forth, and it's a reset. It's a restart. Amen? Every Shabbat, every Moed, I'm reminded of who's the source of my promise, my hope. I meet with the one that walks between the pieces. Every Shabbat, there's the potential and the opportunity for an exchange of garments. So the garments that had become worn down, the garments that were starting to get spots and wrinkles, that's okay. They're getting cleaned up. They're getting refined come Shabbat. He clothes his bride. He rejuvenates her. He empowers her. And now I can go forward again. But how many of you realize that if I do this every single Shabbat, come the Yovel cycle, my goodness, I missed it. There should begin to be a change. There should begin to be a maturation so that now every Shabbat as I'm entering, I'm becoming more and more like him. Amen? Now, in fact, the numerical value of Piinchas, 208, it also is the value of the Hebrew term arbe, the locusts. A swarm, a plague of devastation that consumes everything in its sight. It's first seen in Exodus chapter 10, affecting the sons and the land of Egypt. Revelation also speaks of a future swarm of locusts. And yet, 208, the same letters, the same value, also forms the Hebrew word aruba, Strong's number 699, which means a window. It's seen in Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, where he says, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house. And prove me now herewith, saith Yahweh of Sabaoth, Yahweh of hosts, if I will not open you the windows, the aruba of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it." The name Piinchas is literally this declaration and this reminder. Will there be blessings or locusts? At this moment, at this line that's being drawn in the sand. And when you begin to look at that verse in Malachi, pour you out a blessing. The word pour, it's Strong's number 7324, ruk, and it means to make empty, to empty out, but it can infer to pour oneself out. And then the term that, he says, if I will not pour out a blessing, that there shall not be enough room. The word that in Hebrew is ad, as far as even to, until, or up to, but it's from the same root stem as moed, a set time and a set place. Malachi was challenging us that if we'll be obedient with what? With the tangible seed that he gave me to yada. He gave me to practice with. He gave me to learn how to handle things with. If I will be obedient with the tangible seed, with the tithe that belongs in his storehouse that I've been given, which, by the way, it's a reflection of how I handle the seed of his word and his promise. If I'm not handling this in the natural correctly, then that becomes an indicator how I'm handling the promise in the spiritual. Malachi challenges us that if you'll be obedient with the tangible seed, then watch and see at the set times. Now notice, not when you want it, not when you think you need it, but at the set time, how Yahweh will pour himself out, and you will have provision and a refuge, while as the locusts around you consume everything else. Joel chapter 2 verse 25 says, "And I will restore to you the years that the locusts have eaten." Amen. When I begin to look at that verse, you read the end of it. We often say, we joke about, you can rebuke the enemy, but you can't rebuke Yahweh. In Joel chapter 2, at the end of that verse, when he talks about what he's going to restore, he makes the statement that I sent among you. And it's a very sobering thought, because we find that the first reference of these locusts, they're sent to Egypt. They affect Egypt. Why does he send the locusts among his people? Because there's still Egypt in you. And as long as there's Egypt in you, that has to be consumed. That has to be removed. And when what is left is what is of value, I will restore to you the years that have been eaten. Now let's look at Pinchas. In the midst of devastation, Pinchas experiences his Yovel. He has a status change. He's granted a covenant of peace, and he's acknowledged as one who is capable of functioning as a priest and representative of Yahweh upon the earth. While simultaneously others in the camp of Israel are destroyed for their seeming lack of knowledge, and they're worn out before their promise. What is this priesthood Pinchas is clothed with? Could it be that Pinchas alone steps into and becomes part of the Melchizedek eternal priesthood? The garment meant for all of Israel to put on at Sinai, yet due to their refusal to deal with the generational garbage, they remain sons of bondage. And here, at the threshold, at the last moment, where in order to cross safely, a garment's needed. Proof. A token, a sign that I in fact belong and have access here. He's granted this garment, this covering. It's the garment that Yahweh offers when he walks between the pieces. In Numbers chapter 25, verse 10 is where we see this spoken of. It says, "And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, hath turned my wrath away from the children of Israel while he was zealous for my sake among them, that I consume not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Wherefore say, Behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace, and he shall have it, and his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his Elohim, and made an atonement for the children of Israel." Let's look at this name, Pinchas. Strong's number 6372. It's translated as meaning the mouth of brass. And you'll find the etymology and the meaning of this name is unclear, and sources are quite divided regarding it. The first part of his name seems to stem from the Hebrew root word peh. Strong's number 6310. It represents the mouth. It comes from the root meaning to cleave in pieces, to break into pieces, to shatter, but also to blow. The base idea of these root stems is that of blowing, and it imitates the sound of blowing or releasing breath. Here, Pinchas is written with an undersized small yod. The hand is what the yod represents. Specifically, the active hand by which to grasp or take possession. It's a symbol of power and strength. It represents as well the spark or atom of life, the spark of the Spirit in everything. And when you look at the letter Yod, the sages actually also point out that the Yod looks like the ram's horn. It looks like the shofar. Shepherd John at the beginning of the service began to talk about the significance of the shofar. It becomes the refuge. It becomes the tabernacle of the breath, the voice. And now we attach this to the name Pinchas. The Yod is emphasized. It's a small Yod. There's something about this Yod being inserted into Pinchas that's meant to draw our attention. If you look and you pay attention to the meaning to break into pieces, the root of his name, once again it brings to mind the covenant between the pieces. Now we find those broken pieces being breathed into. Breath is released. They're empowered. They're strengthened. There's a spark of life that wasn't seen before. They become a tabernacle for the voice. They become a tabernacle for the breath, and they're garmented, revealing their status change. It becomes the mirror image of Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 9, the valley of dry bones, the pieces, waiting for the one that made a promise to those bones to come and walk between the pieces. And as he walks between the pieces, to begin to breathe, to blow onto those bones again. Then he said unto me, prophesy unto the wind, prophesy, son of man, and say to the wind, thus saith Yahweh Elohim, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. The word slain in Hebrew, it's Strong's number 2026, harag, and it means to kill, to slay, to murder, to destroy. But the numerical value is 208, the same value as Pinchas. The bones of the scattered house of Israel are the Pinchas at the end days. The ones that have come, they're there, they've offered themselves up, they die to themselves, and they're waiting. They're a fit tabernacle, a fit vessel, waiting on the one that walks between the pieces to come and insert the Yod, to insert the ability to possess, to grasp the strength, the power, life into the bones. Do you see the significance of what's taking place? Israel, the scattered dry bones, laying at the threshold of their inheritance. They're the pieces waiting for the one to come and walk between them. And by doing so, breathe life into these bones, causing them to live again. These bones are both the furthest from where they started and the closest to where they're meant to be simultaneously. They're at the threshold of a status change. Continuing to look at this, you'll find that the roots of his name, Pinchas, it comes from the root panah, which literally means to turn, and it's indicating the face. This root panah is found in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3, it says, the voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare panah. Ye the way of Yahweh, make straight in the desert a highway for our Elohim. The word for desert there is Arabah, the same place that Israel's encamped at in this Torah portion. The desert, the wilderness, the sterile region, first seen here in Numbers 22:1, the plains of Moab, exactly where this encounter takes place with Pinchas. Panah, prepare the way in the Arabah. It says to make straight in this place a highway for our Elohim. The word highway is Strong's number 4546, Masilah, and it means a highway, a raised way, but the same letters rearranged form the Hebrew term hasulam, the ladder. In the midst of the place where it looks like your hope is cut off, you're the dry bones who actually exclaim in Ezekiel, we have no hope. Our hope is cut off. Isaiah declares, prepare, panah, turn the face, and prepare to receive the breath, because hasulam, the ladder, is about to appear. Amen? The same ladder that Jacob had a vision of, and that Messiah himself declared he was the manifestation of. In the midst of the sterile place of the Arabah, Pinchas prepares the way for the manifestation of the ladder. A winding ladder or staircase connecting heaven and earth, literally a picture of the DNA of Yahweh. Why? There's about to be a test before you cross into the land. Are you one that's an heir? Your DNA better match. They're at the place waiting on the Hasulam, the ladder, literally the DNA of Yahweh, with the ability to transform, rejuvenate, and repair the house of Israel to show up. It's about preparing the bones to receive the breath so they will be born again, heirs capable of stepping into their promised inheritance. Because of the actions of Pinchas, we find that he is granted what is termed a covenant of peace. In Numbers chapter 25, verse 12, it says, "Wherefore say, behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace." In Hebrew, it's et briti shalom. Notice the Aleph Tav, appended to the beginning of this covenant of peace. Let's look at the word covenant. It's Strong's number 1285, Brit, translated as meaning covenant, alliance, a pledge. So called from the idea of cutting, since it was the custom in making solemn covenants to pass between the divided parts. Once again, the covenant of the pieces, the parts of the sacrifices. Brit, covenant, is connected to the root word bara. Strong's number 1254, to create, to shape, to form, to cut, or carve out. Pastor David taught about this term bara, literally a cutting out of himself. It's used in the creation of heaven and earth solely by the role of Elohim. We see bara, this idea of to cut, to carve out, to create, to shape, first seen in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth. Bereshit bara. What exactly was Elohim doing? Could it be that from the beginning moments of creation, he was cutting a covenant? He was bara. He's cutting a covenant, and he's walking between the pieces. Knowing the end from the beginning, could it be that Elohim already knew the cost of this covenant? And this is what's on his mind as he bara. Bara bereshit. Bereshit bara. As he begins to cut this covenant, he's looking all the way through time. And that's why Pinchas is told it's the et brit shalom. The price the Aleph Tav pays to guarantee that you have shalom. Amen? At the beginning of creation, Elohim is walking between the pieces. And as he is walking between these pieces and this covenant's being cut, what do we see in the midst of those pieces? In the Hebrew, it's bereshit bara, bara, bara. In the middle of this covenant that's cut, in the middle of these pieces, is the word sheath. Strong's number 7897. It's the word for garment. One that establishes or appoints a person in an official position. When Yahweh walked between the pieces at creation, with the encounter with Abraham, when he walks between the pieces at Sinai, between the mountain peaks, when he's walking between the pieces here at the threshold, waiting for Israel to cross, each time a garment's offered. It's a garment that would establish the new identity and position of the wearer. This is the garment that Adam's clothed with when he's created. Romans chapter 13, verse 14 says it this way, "But put you on the Messiah Yeshua, put him on as a garment, and make not provision for the flesh." When clothed in this garment, you can have peace, you can have shalom. You're made whole and complete again. The term shalom literally indicates there's nothing lacking. Everything has been made whole. This is why the word shalom or peace here, in association with Pinchas, it's actually written with the broken vav in the Hebrew scroll. The vav represents the connector, the joiner, the one that connects heaven and earth. Remember the hasulam, the ladder that's showing up? He's the connector between heaven and earth. In order for you to have peace, he has to be broken. I changed my brokenness for the wholeness of Messiah. He became broken on my behalf. And when I put on this garment that Elohim at the very beginning of creation knew Adam was going to compromise, knew he would need a garment, knew he would need a covering. So at the very beginning, before anything's created, he walks between the pieces. And he creates a garment. that will be found for those that would come and avail themselves of this covenant promise, that in this garment we could declare, I'm an heir. But I can't wear this garment and the garments of Egypt, the carnal fleshly man. That's why in order to access this garment, the first thing Abraham's told, bring a sacrifice. This man, this carnal fleshly individual, this has to die. And when I show up to walk between the pieces, when it seems as if you're the furthest and most cut off from your hope, then I will garment you with this garment. At this coming Yovel, who will be revealed? Who will be born? At the end of Jacob's trouble, as the labor pains intensify, what's about to appear? That's been concealed, that's been hidden, who will be born? Romans chapter 8, verse 19, the Apostle Paul describes it this way, that all of creation is groaning and waiting for the manifestation of the Weos sons, the mature sons and daughters of Elohim that are capable of handling, they yada. They understand and know how to handle the inheritance of their father. I believe when we are seen on the scene, they will have a very specific garment, just like Joseph did, just like Messiah did. They will have a garment that has been prepared for them, that they have now put on, and they have filled out the stature of this garment, which is why in the book of Revelation it talks about the bride has made herself ready. She has her garments arrayed, and these garments will identify her as an individual that as the locust and devastation is all around, it doesn't matter. I have a window that's about to open, and he is going to pour himself out because it's our Yovel. It may be the season of devastation for others, but it's the Yovel for his people. Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Amen. My goodness.